What is up, everybody, and welcome to the All-NBA podcast, part of the All-City Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Maddez. We have a great slate for you because every game last night had something interesting about it. To help me talk about it, I've got Tim Legler. Legs, how you doing today?
I'm great, man. I'm great. There was good slate of games, like a lot of games, and three that I was really looking forward to. I thought, should be all very competitive games, and we didn't really get a single really important possession in the last 4 or 5 minutes in any of those three games, and we're going to cover all of them. So let's get into it.
Those games are going to be the Wolves and the Clippers. Wolves kind of a statement win on the road over the Clippers. We're going to talk about the Warriors Jazz. I know we talked about the Warriors yesterday, but they got another impressive win, so we have to talk about it. And then the Bucks defense shows up against the Nuggets, or is it that the Nuggets offense didn't show up against the Bucks? We'll talk about that. And then at the end of the show, we're going to run through these slates of games. We'll also talk about predicting who is going to be the 1 seed in the Western Conference. But first, we are presented, as always, by DraftKings Fantasy Sports. Check out what DraftKings has to offer this season with code ALLNBA, because life's more fun when you're on the action. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. We start, Legs, with this win the Wolves got in Los Angeles, the late game last night, 121-100, and it was fueled by an impressive bully ball stretch to end the third quarter and to start the fourth quarter, where the Clippers love to go small, test out their small lineup where they can spread you out and play one-on-one. Did not work because the Wolves defense snuffed it out and really put the clamps on. And then on the offensive end, just bully balled them. I think the statement moment for me was Gobert dunking right over Kawhi Leonard in the post. That was a play that happened in the third quarter that was sort of indicative to me of what stood out about this game. But what stood out to you about it?
Yeah, it's crazy because what you're talking about, that stretch started at about the 4.5 minute mark of the third quarter. And the quarter was pretty tight to that point, but it ended up Minnesota outscored them 40-19 in the third quarter because of what happened at the end of the quarter. And you're right, it was straight force. That's all it was. And if there was a game that I would had watched Minnesota play this year where I was most impressed, that might have been it last night, because that looked like a team that you could see now making a serious run in the Western Conference. And look, I've got doubts. I've got a little bit of doubt about them just because, they haven't really pushed through like those key moments in a playoff series together. And they're going to probably get somebody really good right away because of the way the Western Conference is laid out and the way some of these teams that are going to be, in that 5 through 8 are going to be really good, super talented teams that just have not had, the regular season that you would expect. So I've had doubts about him. Well, I didn't have any doubt about what I saw last night. That was just straight up dominating the guy in front of you. And the play you're talking about with Gobert was kind of indicative. That was like the stamp for the game. And he caught it in the middle of the lane or like a flash from the weak side. And Kawhi was right there. Kawhi is one of the strongest wings in this league.
Yeah.
He's immovable, really, when he plants his both feet into the ground, either end. Like, you're not moving that guy. And Gobert caught it. Kawhi was right there, chested him up, and Gobert just hit him with a shoulder in the middle of his chest, knocked him backwards, and then just went up and threw it down on him. And the bench reaction was sensational, and it was just like absolutely a statement of force against the Clippers. And it wasn't just that. It was Karl Anthony Towns, I thought, played with force the entire night. I thought Anthony Edwards played with force. I thought Naz Reid played with force. They just looked bigger, stronger, and better than the Clippers were, at least last night. You certainly, this isn't a 7-game series. I get it. And the Clippers have been one of the hottest teams in the league. I just was so impressed with the physicality of the Timberwolves and the way that they took it to the Clippers. Now, I'll say this real quick. My final thought before you go. we look at numbers sometimes and you say, oh, wow, Minnesota really, really shut them down and clamped them down defensively because the Clippers shoot 40% from the field, 9 of 28 from the three. They score 100 points. I'm telling you, if you go back and really want to watch it again, the Clippers missed a ton of good shots in this game, and including in that stretch where it got away from them. They were getting clean looks. They had a couple, that were probably not great decisions, but it wasn't like they were getting suffocated. They went through a stretch where they didn't shoot well. So what was more impressive about it for me from the Timberwolves standpoint than their defense against the Clippers, it was the way they were operating offensively against a good team, the good defensive team in the Clippers who have that ability to turn up the heat against you. They couldn't stop them during that stretch. They just could not stop them. Minnesota got whatever they wanted to. So, man, listen, if there's a game you wanted to watch all year for the Timberwolves to state their case about who they are and what damage they might do, that was it, I think.
Yeah. I agree with you. This was a great game to watch. If you want to get to know why people would buy the Timberwolves, this was a good example of it because they won in the ways that I think are, if they're going to win in the playoffs, they're going to win these ways. But I'm going to disagree with you, though, about the shots because you are right that there were some open looks they missed. And there's no question that there were some shots in that run that the Clippers would like to have back. Paul George, off the top of my head, had a wide open right wing three that is one of his favorite shots, and it didn't go down. But I thought Minnesota successfully disrupted any rhythm that they had on offense, really all game, but especially in that stretch. And the number that sticks out to me is the points in the paint. They won that battle 64-42. And, oftentimes the three-pointer, when it's not falling, do you have something else? Are you putting pressure on and then getting kickouts and getting this or that? I thought that Gobert made a huge impact in this game on even guys like Kawhi Leonard, James Harden, who are very good at getting downhill and getting to the rim. I thought even those guys had multiple possessions, especially in that stretch where they started, beat the first line of defense and saw Gobert coming over and it just hesitated, ended up taking a mid-range or circling back. And, so I thought that when you disrupt the rim pressure, even if you're getting open shots, they're just a little bit less in rhythm. And that's why I was impressed with the defense of the Timberwolves.
Look, they had some possessions certainly where they they pressured them and clamped down. Jaden McDaniels had a phenomenal strip possession in that where he got the strip at half court, then had to run down the loose ball and picked it up finally and got ahead of the pack for a dunk. That was a big, like a momentum play, gave them a lot of energy. And I'm not saying that they were just like out there going through the motions defensively. Sure. Of course, they're a good defensive team and they're there. I'm just saying if we want to go back possession by possession and look at what the Clippers were getting, these are makeable shots. Norman Powell had a play where he comes off a ball screen and shoots a wide open 12-foot jumper in that stretch, wide open, completely naked, misses it. They had multiple wide open, uncontested 3-point shots during that stretch. That's all I'm saying. Like the Clippers definitely contributed to it with their shot making. You're always going to give credit to the team, that played well defensively. For me, all I'm saying is I was more impressed with what Minnesota was able to do against the Clippers on the other end of the floor. They went at whoever was in front of them. Every matchup they got, they went right at them. And like I said, they looked small. Harden's got a size advantage on Conley at the point. But then, when Minnesota's playing those two bigs together, basically the Clippers, you got one big on the floor. And then it's either Paul George or Kawhi Leonard, or Terrence Mann. Like those are the next three guys. And you look around, you got a long Jaden McDaniels. You've got Towns, you've got Gobert, and Anthony Edwards, who physically fits the same profile as Kawhi. So they just looked so much bigger and stronger during that stretch. And I just thought they were so certain and confident the way they were playing, the way they went out there, man. So like I said, I just super impressed with everything that I saw of the Timberwolves. And that's what a deep run playoff team looks like, the way that they played last night.
Yeah. The other thing that happened in this game is Monte Morris made his debut and played 18 minutes, which I believe is the most minutes he's played all year. I mean, he didn't play that many games for Detroit, but to get 18 minutes right out of the gate surprised me a little bit in his first active game. But one of the things we've talked about lately, Legs, and I noticed this so much because the Nuggets don't have it. Teams that have a continuity between their main lineups and all of their other blended or bench lineups, I think have an advantage because there's one type of way that you play. You don't have to change up like, okay, now we play this way and it's completely different. Monte Morris offensively has a lot of Mike Conley in his game. Doesn't turn the ball over, knows where to get the ball, can knock down a shot when he needs it, can play with the ball in his hands or with the ball off of his hands, and obviously a good pick and roll player. They have three centers, and they like to play any combination of those three guys, two of those three guys. I think that him, unlike a McLaughlin, obviously unlike a Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Monte gives them the ability to play similarly for 48 minutes. And I thought you saw that last night because, again, that run that they made was really a run of the blended lineups, that it wasn't like it was Monte's reason, but it just was that they were able to keep punching in the exact same way. And the Clippers held it off for a while, but over time, those blended lineups started to just wear them down and wear them down.
Completely agree with you. I was watching Monte Morris thinking the same thing. Like, well, this is one of the more understated acquisitions, right? Because we talked about, we went over a lot of them. And even that day when I was on the air, we were going over it as they were coming in. There wasn't a lot of talk about that, but looking at it, I think it's significant what he brings to them. He's just really proven. He's a proven player, and he looked super comfortable. And it's his first game, and he comes in, and he's a plus 10 in 18 minutes in a really big, important game. That everybody kind of had eyeballs on to see how these two teams were going to match up. I thought Monte Morris, just the way he equipped himself, that's going to bode well for Minnesota. That's just another veteran, polished guard that they're going to have to be able to, handle it against pressure. And Monte Morris is more than capable, by the way. There are times he's going to get hot, and he's going to be able to ride some shots and string them together because he's done it before. So I agree with you. That was nice to watch him last night look that comfortable and assimilate himself that easily.
And, if there's two things that concern me about the Minnesota roster that I'm less concerned of with the Monte addition. I know it's a small addition, but one was, did they have enough ball handling? Because they use guys like Kyle Anderson, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, even Anthony Edwards as ball handlers, and those guys to me are all secondary ball handlers. If they're your primary initiator of an offense, I think they're a little deficient. But now they all, with Monte there, you get to slot them into their appropriate spots, and I think that takes the burden off of them, especially a guy like Anthony Edwards. You don't want him wearing himself out by bringing the ball up the court every single possession. So there's that. And then the 3-point spacing, not even shooting, because last night they only shoot 32%, but the spacing. And that's another area where Monte Morris allows another catch and shoot floor spacer. And I still think they're a little deficient at that one thing. And that's why if you're, bearish on the Wolves going into the playoffs, it's probably for that reason, is that you're worried teams are going to not trust their shooters, and it's going to come down to that. But Monte does just give them another option there. And so that's why I think I like that you brought it up. It was an underrated move. It also happened 24 hours before the deadline. So those always kind of get overlooked because the news is breaking after it. But he fills two big holes that I thought they had. And if he plays like he did last night, he's going to be a very positive player for them.
Oh yeah, definitely. He's not going to be fazed by anything he sees. So I think that's important. They've got some veteran guys on this team that have been through some playoff runs with other teams and some with the Timberwolves to a limited degree. They haven't broken through as a group. This looks like a team that's got a great mixture of some young athletic legs and then veteran guys that are going to be able to handle those situations that crop up in a playoff series. And Monte Morris is one of those guys. He's just not going to be rattled by anything. You're not going to speed him up. He's not going to make mistakes. Super solid pickup and just gives you more depth at the guard spot.
And then the defense, guarding the Clippers one-on-one is just such a tough thing because they have so many guys. But I think the Timberwolves, them and the Pelicans maybe have the best collection of one-on-one defenders. Obviously, having Gobert behind there makes everybody better. But you mentioned Jaden McDaniels, who was, I thought, phenomenal last night on one of the toughest assignments. But I always look at Mike Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and even Karl-Anthony Towns, who had a couple good defensive possessions in this game. They just did a really good job one-on-one defensively of making everything hard.
Yeah, definitely. They have the ability to be able to press up more than most teams in this league because, they know that they've got an awful lot of size behind them. And they've got a guy in Gobert who's always going to be tracking. He's always going to be bothering people once they get to the rim. So they have athletically the personnel, particularly with Edwards and McDaniels on the floor at the same time, and Alexander Walker as well. Those three guys can pressure up a little bit more and force guys to get out of their go-to step back stuff and make them have to then counter that and get down into the interior of the defense where you're going to have a lot of size and length coming your way. You saw a lot of that last night. Stuff in the paint at the rim, I felt like, yeah, Minnesota does a great job. They always do, of contesting those shots and getting a lot of long arms flying at guys trying to finish floaters and stuff off the glass or anything in the post. And they did it again last night. It was just as complete a performance as you're going to see, because I thought the Clippers played hard. They were ready to play. And this was a one possession game, pretty tight game for 2.5 quarters. And then for what Minnesota did over the last 16 minutes of the game, it just completely, they were on two different levels, these two teams last night. And I don't think the Clippers really expected that. So Minnesota, statement game is a good way to put it. I don't believe in them too often in the regular season, but I do think that was one last night. And you could tell by the approach Minnesota had. They weren't treating that like just another game. This was important to them, knowing that the Clippers have been this hot. And a lot of people now, actually, over the last few weeks, just when I say a lot of people, I'm talking about the totality of the people that cover the league. Look at kind of the narrative behind the Clippers, what it's been lately. A lot of people think this team can get to the finals or win the whole thing. That's what they look like now. And so Minnesota's aware of that, even though they've been, at the top or near the top of the West most of the year. They're aware of that. So they were up on their toes for this, man, and they responded.
Do you think, because this would be a very fascinating playoff matchup to me, if they were to match up in the second round as a 1-4?
Absolutely.
The thing is, the Clippers love playing small. I mean, I'm curious if the Clippers are going to win a series where they never get to go to their smallest lineups. And the most interesting thing that happened last night, in my opinion, was when the Clippers went small, the Timberwolves didn't blink. They stayed big and they won. Do you think that this is a series that if it were to happen, the Clippers would be able to play small? Or is this one where they're going to have one of Plumlee or Zubac on the court at all times?
Yeah, I think you're going to have to have one of those bigs for sure. I think that because I think a lot of it has to do with how multidimensional offensively Towns is. That's different. You think about like Cleveland is also a great defensive team, and they're playing two bigs all the time. And Mobley and Allen kind of are getting better at being able to occupy different spots on the floor. Evan Mobley's not Karl Anthony Towns. And the way that you have to play him and guard him, because Karl Anthony Towns will beat up smaller guys. He had some switches early in the game where he catches the ball, he turns his back on you, and he is an absolute load to try to, guard with a guy that's like 6'7" or below, and he doesn't notice they're there. As long as he doesn't like settle for a quick three, like if he's taking shots that are, what he's looking for. So I don't think you're going to have a choice. You're not going to be able to play basically a point guard and four wings. You're going to have to have somebody with some size on the floor at all times against Minnesota if you're the Clippers. And that's, like you said, that's not necessarily their best lineup.
That's why I think the playoffs are setting up to be really fascinating, especially with the Warriors kind of coming on strong with their small ball. Is you have teams like the Clippers, the Suns, and the Warriors, who I think really want to play small. And then you have the Thunder, who are just small because they have to be, with Chet. So you have half the teams basically that want to play small. And then you have the Nuggets, the Timberwolves, the Kings. These are teams that want to play big and have to play big by virtue of who they have. So I think we're going to get a lot of interesting small ball versus bully ball. And I know that small ball has won that battle for most of the last decade. I'm very curious to see if these teams have kind of figured out a new bully ball that maybe is ready to combat it. I just think we're setting up for something very fascinating there. Any final thoughts on this game or what you saw from either team?
For me, and I've been, we've been talking about the Timberwolves a lot this year, justifiably so, with the year that they've had. We're always, we're constantly trying to figure out how do these teams really stack up with each other here at the top of the Western Conference? Because you had teams like the Clippers that made a major change later on, and they got hot here more recently. They weren't very good at the start of the year. Denver is a team that is so proven. We kind of know what they are. So Oklahoma City and Minnesota have been getting all this talk all year, where you really are trying to figure out. And then because you also have Phoenix, Dallas, like teams like this, New Orleans, like all these teams lurking. This to me is put a very clear picture in my mind of what Minnesota is at their best. And I'm going to use this as kind of a reference point for me when I talk about them the rest of the year. That's how impressed I was with the way that they played in the second half of this game.
Well, that brings us to the top four in the Western Conference, because that game obviously put them a game ahead of the Clippers. If they would have lost, that would have switched. The Clippers would have been at the top of the West. But right now, the Timberwolves sit there. And we have this graphic. If we look at the top four, you can pull up here, Emma. The 37-16 record for the Timberwolves. Going forward, they have the 5th easiest strength of schedule. This is according to my favorite calendar site, Positive Residual, which factors in home and away and rest advantage versus disadvantage. They have the 5th easiest remaining, and DraftKings has them at plus 185. Right below them, you have the Thunder, who have the 7th easiest schedule, plus 500. You have the Nuggets, who have the second best odds on DraftKings, plus 200, because they have the easiest strength of schedule remaining. I think they have 5 more home games than road games the rest of the way, and the fewest back-to-backs in the NBA. And then the Clippers, who have the toughest schedule, 19th easiest, and then they are at plus 280. So knowing this, Legs, and looking at those, remaining strength of schedule for whatever it's worth, plus the odds, do you have a prediction for who you think is going to end up winning the number 1 seed?
Yeah, and it's interesting because you and I talked about doing this segment, and I didn't get that information until just now when you popped that up on the screen. And it's going to come down to, in my mind, the way I had them ranked, how they're going to finish, the exact order of what those odds tell you. So
really?
I have Minnesota at number 1, and you had the strength schedule on there. Yeah. They've got 5 more home games, I believe, than road games the rest of the way. That's going to be big for them.
Yep. 17 to 12. You're right. Yep.
And then you've got Denver in number 2. And I don't know that Denver, I don't think Denver, because of the fact that they won it, man, that gives you a lot of cachet to kind of handle the regular season how you won. I don't necessarily think that they're they really want to get that number 1 seed. They think that that's critical. I think their big thing would be, let's just make sure, hey, we're going to manage our guys. We're obviously going to, we're going to win games along the way, but a team like that is not as focused on it. I just think their schedule and just the way that they play, the continuity of the way they play, will allow them to finish in the 2 spot. I think the Clippers finish 3rd. I think Oklahoma City finishes 4th. That's how I would put it. But look, man, these teams are separated by a game and a half, 4 teams. Who knows? But I think Minnesota's, I just think that, number 1, I just think that, they're so impressive defensively. It gives you a chance every night. Even when nights you don't shoot well, nights you're missing somebody, nights you have a bad shooting night collectively, it gives you a chance to be in games. When you combine that with the fact that they've got 5 more home games the rest of the way than road games, that's why I think ultimately Minnesota ends up with the 1 seed.
So they play each other. Denver and Minnesota play each other 3 more times this season. 2 of them will be in Denver. 1 of them will be in Minnesota. Each team will have 1 home game that is on the second night of a back-to-back for them, actually traveling from Utah in both instances. So that'll be interesting because both teams in a way will have the ability down the stretch, most likely, to control their fate should they win those games. So I think that's one of the things that I kind of like about how the schedule broke out, is we'll see that matchup going into the playoffs. And if it is 1-2 in whatever order with those 2 teams, playing each other 3 times in the final month will be a nice table setter to perhaps eventually meeting each other again, albeit in the conference finals. So I like that one. Denver scares me, and we're going to get to them a little bit later. We saw what they did last year in the last month of the season, where they clearly chose health over wins down the stretch, and they are coming off of 2 back-to-back blowout losses that were pretty disheartening and discouraging. But nonetheless, for most of the year, they have looked like a team that's capable of making that strike late in the season. So we'll see. Should be noted, I think the Nuggets of all those 4 teams is lowest in the tiebreaker by virtue of having lost to their division opponents and also losing to Minnesota and Oklahoma City this year. All right, let's take a break. On the other side, the Warriors keep rolling. They got a very impressive win in one of the hardest places to win in all of the NBA, in Utah. And they have some momentum going that we talked about yesterday, but they did it again last night. So we'll talk about it. But first, NBA is in full swing. Football season is officially over. So now's the time to hop on DraftKings. That line we just gave you for the 1 seed in the Western Conference, that's a fun little bet to throw down. Who will win? I like that you don't just have to bet on record. It's who's going to win the conference. And those odds are really nice with the 3 teams, being all bunched right there together. So you can hop on DraftKings and make that bet. You could bet on MVP. I had a lot of Luka Doncic fans in the mentions of our show yesterday saying that he was a lock to win MVP. If you believe that, you got great odds on it on DraftKings. So hop on DraftKings and put your money where your mouth is and see if you can win big come the awards reveal. Download DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code ALLNBA. New customers bet $5 and get $200 instantly, whether you win or lose. Only on DraftKings with ALLNBA. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 878-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. That's 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and older, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/basketball for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. All right, the other game we wanted to get to, the Warriors go in to Utah, to Salt Lake, and they pick up a big win. What stood out to you about this one, Legs?
Oh man, a few things. So first, I want to talk about, they can still get these nights out of Klay Thompson. Klay played well in this game. Now it's funny because he played well, but he still had one of the worst missed 3-point shots I've ever seen Klay Thompson have. He probably has never missed a three as bad as he missed one last night from like the right wing that slammed off the backboard without hitting anything on the opposite side of the rim. You're just like, wow. And it was like before he had really gotten kind of into a rhythm. Overall, though, he played well. He had cuts. He had stuff in transition. He had plays that they ran for him, designed plays to come off down screens into a dribble handoff like they always run for Klay, but they haven't been running as much because of the inconsistency and like the lack of confidence right now. They ran some of that for him last night. He had like a one-footed floater, so it looked kind of like a Klay Thompson game, that we're used to in the course of his career. So he still has these nights in him. Now, finding that consistently has been the big challenge here. But that's first. Let's just start there. Klay Thompson played well last night, and that's really, really important supplemental offense now when he gives that to them. Because Wiggins was good. Kuminga was good. Curry was good until he was great in the fourth quarter. He had a game that a lot of guards in this league would be like, yeah, it's a good game for a good guard in the NBA through three. He had missed some shots he usually makes. I thought they did a pretty good job of like tagging him, trailing him, denying him, forcing him to, to not really get clean looks. And then he went absolutely nuts in the fourth quarter. He hits one, and then the very next trip hits another three. And now you're like, oh man, because now he's just going to be absolutely running frenetically and all that pressure that puts on teams, and it creates stuff for other guys. He did that. Ends up with 5 threes in the fourth, 7 overall, third straight game with 7 or more made threes. He was great. I thought, to me, this was one of the better like defensive games I've seen Golden State play all year. Their defense was so active and fast the entire game.
Yeah.
And and so like they've won some games here lately. We've talked about them yesterday. They're starting to get some notice. People are kind of going, hey, this is interesting now. Like Wiggins is starting to play a little better. Kuminga's been great. You're expecting him now to play really well every night. Curry's been sensational. And it's like, okay, wow, they're starting to get some wins, and they're starting to, which is they lost so many close games. They're starting to win those games. So now you go into Utah, and I really wanted to watch this game for that reason. You're a hot team. This Utah's a good team at home, really tough. Let's see what they do in this situation. And they go in there and they win the game by 22 points. They win it going away in the fourth quarter. So it just, to me, adds to the intrigue of what we're seeing in Golden State right now. And again, they're elevating themselves in terms of what you need to watch every night because they're getting it together. To what extent? I don't know. That remains to be seen. It's too small of a sample size.
Right.
Let's see if this thing keeps trending in the right direction. If at some point they get Chris Paul back and what that does for them and adds to it. But they played great last night on both ends of the floor. And defensively really good, and then offensively good enough until Curry basically closed the game in the fourth quarter.
And this was a big game, not just because it's tough to play at Utah, not just because it helped them match their longest win streak of the season, 5 games, but also the Jazz are the team that's right behind the Warriors in the standings. And I know we're only talking about the last spot of the play-in, but for the longest portion of the season, the Warriors were on the outside looking in. They now move 3 games ahead of the Utah Jazz in the loss column. That's pretty big. That's pretty massive with the amount of games that are remaining on the schedule to have a 3-game cushion. And now you look at it, they're pretty much tied in the, they're actually 1 ahead in the loss column of the Lakers. And then within striking distance to those teams that are above them, the Pelicans, Suns, Kings, and Mavericks, they're as close as the Utah Jazz are behind the Warriors. So you look at that and you go, just one little 5-game stretch, a little rebirth of the Warriors here has got them back in position to kind of control their fate. But let me ask you this, because this is a thing I keep thinking about with the Warriors. How many of their best 5, like you say, you go into the last 3 minutes, 5 minutes of a game tied and you have to get a win. How many guys are a lock to be on the court right now, and who are those guys?
Well, obviously Klay Thompson's not one of them. So I think you're going to have a lock. You're going to have Kuminga on the court. You're going to have Curry on the court. You're going to have Wiggins on the court. You're going to have Draymond on the court.
So
I think Podziemski is the most likely the guy. He's a winning player, and he's really good under pressure. He can make a play at the right time by passing the basketball and making the right read. He can score when he needs to. Pretty good on the ball defender. I think Podziemski's the guy now more often than not that you're going to see out there on the court, unless some of those minutes get eaten up by Gary Payton II, because he just came back. And I think it's going to be situational. If you need a little bit more offense, it's probably going to be Podziemski. If you need a little bit more defense, you're trying to hold a lead, and they have a guard you're trying to control, you're going to see Payton out there. But I think more often than not, it's going to be one of those two. But I think the first 4 guys, they're going to be out there. Draymond, Curry, Wiggins, and Kuminga, I think those 4 guys will be on the court. And then it's just a rotation of guys. Maybe one night, if Klay's really got to go, and you go with Klay. There's going to be nights when it's not him because he's the way he's looked offensively. So you got Podziemski, Klay, Payton, and then probably Saric even, I think, at times, depending if you need a little bit more size and who you're playing against.
So I don't know about Saric just because I don't know how he fits with a Draymond and a
but I agree with you. First of all, I forgot about Kevon Looney too, because that's another guy that Kerr has great trust in, that if they need to go bigger, it might be Looney instead of Saric.
He does have great trust in him, but he's playing these like 11, 8, 9 minutes, over these last few games when they've been winning. I mean, they are a team that really is going back to being all in. And to me, they're the most compelling small ball team just because they're the only, like we talked about the Suns, we talked about the Clippers. They're the only team that has proven to be able to do this at a high level with Draymond at center. I mean, we have a decade basically of him doing it. So all those other teams maybe have more compelling offenses, but Draymond's the one guy that I look at and go, you know what? He could defend some of these big guys in the West. We'll have to wait and see. But as much as I agree with you about Podziemski being the guy who I think is most likely at this moment, but I kind of love Gary Payton in that spot. And I don't know if they're going to have enough shooting with that lineup. You're basically talking about Steph, Wiggins, and Kuminga become your floor spacers because you're going to have Draymond and Gary Payton on the floor. You're not going to have a lot of spacing from that, with those two guys. But I love, you talked about last night, they looked fast. That's Gary Payton. He is so, it's also Kuminga and some of these other guys, but Gary Payton to me as a defender is so tenacious and fast and speeds people up and gets hands on the ball and hands just constantly pestering the ball, that I love the way he and Draymond look when they're on the court together defensively. So to me, I kind of like that look, even though I agree Pods is a little bit more of a two-way player.
Yeah, that's why I said I think it's gonna be situational depending on the night and which end of the floor is better for the Warriors on that given night. Is that they need more out of. They have 2 options there because they are a little bit different. Podziemski is a guy that offensively is just going to do more things that are going to help other guys on the floor. Payton is a guy that he's going to find ways to score because of his athletic ability, his quickness. With lobs and transition stuff, and every now and then he'll sneak in there, get you an offensive rebound or tip in. But Podziemski's a guy that you can just run your normal offense in the flow with the read and react stuff, and he's so good at that and so good at interpreting what needs to be done. He's also got great communication skills for a rookie. Like, I've rarely seen a rookie that is that communicative and talkative and demonstrative when he's got the ball dribbling and pointing and directing guys. And it's not like, hey, I'm trying to get something for myself. Give me a ball screen. I want to go. It's not even that. He's getting guys organized from a spacing standpoint before they start to run their action. I've been very impressed with that. Like, his grip on what they're trying to do is so high. And it's obvious from the beginning. Like, and even when I went out there in the preseason and talked to all those guys, like Kerr especially, like, just so high on him and Mike Dunleavy Jr., what they had seen to that point in camp, they have an incredible trust in him. So, look, I don't think you can go wrong either way, man. It's going to depend on a given night what you need, because I think both of them can give you different things.
Yeah. Real quickly, just one line here on the Utah Jazz or one take on the Utah Jazz. This is the second year in a row. And look, the season's not over. There's still time. but it's the second year in a row where they have been a really good story, surprise story, better than expected. And then midway through the season, it kind of falls apart and they fall back out of the playoffs. I'm not saying it's over, but at the moment, it's not looking good for them to make the playoffs. What do you make of that? I mean, they were always trying to rebuild, but it is a little weird when you have a chance to be a playoff team 2 years in a row and you end up coming up short. Is there reason to maybe be a little, not concerned, but is it weird to you that Utah to be in that same spot 2 years in a row?
No, I'm not really. I mean, I was a little bit surprised that they were as bad as they were early in the year. I'm not, there's somewhere in the middle of like how hot they've been and how
Yeah.
bad they were. Right. That's what I thought they would be. And it's kind of what
Right.
they're going to end up. So no, I'm not really surprised by that. I want to do have one note on them from last night.
Okay.
And well, actually two. One is like Colin Sexton is all the way back with his athletic ability. He's all the way back. And you remember what this guy was doing in Cleveland,
So
like
quick.
before he got hurt. And I was waiting, and last night he had some of those explosive plays where he was able to take off and hang in the air and finish at the rim. So I want to say that first. And secondly, I was so impressed with how good Walker Kessler was last night defensively. My goodness, is he active? The stuff that he disrupts, the blocks that he gets to, and he had a couple plays. He broke up two lobs where he was completely out of position because he was helping on a drive, and they throw a lob and he just takes one step, jumps backwards basically, and then tips the lob at the rim. In addition to the 4 blocks that he had, so that stood out to me. He's averaging 2.8 blocks in like 23 minutes.
Yeah.
And his rebound number is about 8, almost 8 in 23 minutes. So like his production as a rebounder, shot blocker, and his activity level, super impressed with that last night. I think he's come a long way in terms of his understanding of positional defense that allows him to cover more ground and be more effective. So that's kind of from Utah's perspective. That's what I was noticing on their end of the floor.
I mean, he's so good. I want to see where he adds, where he develops an offensive game. Obviously, he has to become a better free throw shooter, but defensively, I'm with you, man. That guy really affects shots. Let's go to another game here. The Bucks get a blowout, defensive-minded win over the Denver Nuggets, 112-95. The Nuggets held under 100 points in this game. It's the second game in a row that the Nuggets have been blown out. They were blown out 3 nights ago in Sacramento. Then they go to Milwaukee and get blown out here. What stood out to you about this game?
Well, I'll tell you what. I want you to go first because this is your squad. You watch them every night, man. I was stoked for this game, and Denver did not have it, and it was apparent early. What did you see, man? What was different about them?
Well, one, I think they had and I don't know this, but I'm guessing they had a really good Super Bowl party. I'm guessing it was a really fun one because this was a team that looked checked out from the start. I mean, you look at halftime, Jokic, I think, had 23 points. The rest of the starters had 7 total. So this was a game where really none of the other guys showed up. KCP had been out a few games with a hamstring injury and came back in this one. And he only played 9 minutes. It was 9 too many. He clearly was not ready to return from that injury. And then Jamal Murray played just 18 really horrible minutes because he too is dealing with an injury. So to me, this is a game where, not to make the excuse, because I think Denver could have had a better intensity and attention to detail and all those things over their last 2. But this is a game where I thought Denver, down a couple guys that tried to give it a go, got blown out, and then just had no ability to sort of regain any kind of momentum throughout the course of this game. I think Denver, and tell me what you think about this, Legs. Denver, more than most teams, needs their full complement of starting 5 because they're such a chemistry-based team and they have pieces that fit so nicely. So other teams can be losing their 5th guy, their 4th guy. You plug a new guy in, does the same thing, it's fine. With Denver, I feel like they need their guys, and not having KCP, not having Murray, they couldn't replace him last night.
I agree with that because it's like a production line, right? Like a factory line.
Yeah.
You take somebody off the line, right? It's
Right.
definitely
Yep.
you're not gonna produce as much. And I think that's what it looked like. What you're saying about Jamal Murray was interesting because I saw at one point in the game, he threw a pass. I think it was in the first quarter, might have been the second, but he threw a pass from the left wing, trying to get it to a shooter on the right side of the floor, like in the corner, and it was intercepted.
Yeah.
And he would have been, based on where he was when he threw the pass, he would have been the first guy back because he was the highest Denver offensive player when he threw the ball. Ball was stolen. I don't remember what players picked it off. They went the other way. He didn't even make an attempt to get back. And it led to a dunk, right? And I was like, he actually he actually kind of put his hand over his face as he started to jog back. And then I was watching him after that because that's not like him. Came up the floor, and then there was like a dead ball whistle. And I noticed he was bent over, like holding his knees right in front of Mike Malone on the sidelines. They were having a conversation. Like, Mike Malone was bent down. He was looking up at him. They were talking. I was trying to figure out what that was. He looked like he was like physically ill or something. It almost looked like they were talking about, do you need to come out? Like, are you okay? You need to come out of the game. Right. And so maybe it was just whatever he's dealing with, but he did not look himself. I think the thing that was apparent from the very beginning of this game, I don't know that I've seen Giannis get to the rim that easily early in the game as he did against Denver. And that's not what you expect when you're going to play Denver. And because they're so well prepared, and everybody knows you have to make sure you've got bodies in front of his driving paths. That's really what it comes down to for Giannis. The commitment to get back, and then the commitment to play the edge of the lane and force him to have kickouts or run people over. They didn't do that. He got where he wanted to go. I was actually shocked to see they only had, I believe, 44 points in the paint. I felt like they were all Giannis, like in the first 18 minutes of the game. Every time you looked up, he was at the rim. So I just think that chalk it up to one of those nights in an 82-game season. It's unfortunate because of what that game could have given us if Denver was more, ready. That could have been a great game with a great finish, and it never got there because the Bucks were absolutely more ready to play, fresher, more bounce, more aggressive. Denver didn't have it. They did not look very good at all, and they can put this in their memory bank and get this out of their memory bank real quickly, though.
Yeah, I mean, Denver has one more game before the break, hosting Sacramento. We'll see if they bounce back in that one, but 2 in a row where they get blown out. Here's another thing that's interesting, and it's actually interesting for both sides. You're right, Giannis was incredible. 36, 18, 5 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks. That's everything. He dominated this game. They also had him guarding Aaron Gordon, and they had him playing more of a roamer role defensively, which is obviously what he's best at. The big question for the Bucks is going to be, can they defend? Last night, they defended at an elite level. And my question is, with the Nuggets, more teams this year than ever before have just not guarded Aaron Gordon, if they have the ability to. And a team like Milwaukee has the ability to use a Giannis in that role where he can run off and contain anything on the perimeter, but he's going to pack the paint and challenge Aaron Gordon at the rim. They did that last night, and they are very well suited to playing that style of defense. I think it's the best defense that Giannis can play, is being that roamer. But I also think Denver, that's their biggest vulnerability that nobody was really able to exploit last year. Minnesota came the closest of just saying, hey, we're not going to guard Aaron Gordon. We're going to contest him at the rim, but anything outside the paint, we just don't care if he touches the ball or does anything. And he clearly doesn't have confidence in his shot. And Denver does seem to get stuck in the mud sometimes against that style of defense. What do you think?
No, it's definitely a factor. It's when I watch the Nuggets games now, it's kind of what I'm looking for to see if teams are doing that to Aaron Gordon, and you're starting to see teams do it more and more. And he was 2 for 4 from the 3-point line last night, but he didn't take a single free throw. And
right.
This is and that's important, man. The way that he plays and as strong as he is and physical, and when they're at their best, he's getting stuff along the baseline where he's getting those drop balls from Jokic and stuff. And he's powering it up to the rim. He didn't shoot a single free throw. And you're seeing the way teams play him being, you've got to pick something, you've got to give up against them, because if you just try to play them straight up, the way that they operate, the way they read each other, the way they move the ball, as smart as they are, the feel that they have for each other, you're going to have a hell of a time. So you got to figure there's something we have to do to manipulate our defense, to try to force something out of them that they don't want to do. And that's what it is. And that's something to be watching for now every night when you watch Denver play.
And the Bucks on the other end of this, no Chris Middleton in this game as well. And they play with Jay Crowder essentially at the small forward position. So very rare to play even bigger, to move a guy up a spot. But, it worked out for them. Did they find anything in a lineup like that? Or is that just, something they had to do out of necessity?
Yeah, they had to do it out of necessity. And honestly, that's the other thing. Look, they looked great, but when the team that you're playing is that far below their norm, which is exactly what I was watching last night for Denver. I mean, if I didn't know who Denver was, I just got dropped out of a spaceship and I watched a basketball game for the first time, and you asked me about the Denver Nuggets after, I would have said, oh, it's a shame. That team, obviously, that must be a lottery-bound team, because they just didn't have it. They looked awful.
Yeah,
And here we are, the defending champs. So my point is this: when the team is that far below their norm, it's really hard to even know what you saw out of the other team. Because look, the Bucks, since they made the coaching change, they haven't been winning. They've had all kinds of issues defensively this year. You don't erase those in one night. I don't care that you're playing Denver. When Denver plays that poorly, and I'm not trying to, and people, I know you'll get Bucks fans on here losing their minds. You're not giving them any credit. Yes, you're not listening to the whole dialogue. Okay, some of the people that watch these shows, whatever, you got to take off your team's pajamas that you wore to bed last night. You got to like just put your big boy pants on and understand you're watching the game differently if you're a diehard fan of a team, and you have complete bias. We don't have bias here. There is zero bias here. I'm just giving you what I see. Bucks played great, but relative also to how Denver played. It does matter when a team is that far below their standard. And that's what Denver was last night. So my point is, I don't really know exactly if they figured some stuff out in Milwaukee. Let's see. Well, who do they play? What's their schedule coming up? I'll tell you what I'll know, hopefully a little bit more, because I just don't think that was
after the break.
I got it right here real quick. So they got Miami at home tonight, at Memphis. All right, at Minnesota.
Yeah.
Friday, February 23rd, after the break, they're at Minnesota. Maybe that'll be a good gauge by then, because by that time also Doc have had more time. He'll have the break, more film study for him, better feel for what he wants to do and adjustments he can make rather than taking over a team on the fly. You're not really to implement really anything hardly. He'll have more time. That might be the game when we really look at Milwaukee and see how far they've come, like since Doc got there, or what's different since Doc got there.
Yeah, no question. Another game that happened last night, we're going to run through some of these other ones and just make quick notes. Even though we didn't see, those are the games we talked about are the games we keyed in on and watched. These ones, obviously, we're just seeing some of the highlights on. But the Knicks get a brutal loss last night to the Houston Rockets. Aaron Holiday takes a three-pointer off of like a kind of a scramble play, takes a three-pointer at the buzzer, and is maybe bumped into by Jalen Brunson. A foul is called. You review, held. And the Rockets win the game on free throws at the end. After the game, Ed Malloy told pool reporters it was the wrong call. So what did you see from this play? How do you feel about how this all went down?
All right, so I didn't watch that game, so I had to go back and kind of get caught up this morning on that game, and I watched the end of the game. And the very first time I saw it live, I saw it at full speed, I was saying to myself, man, like you rarely see a defender contest with that amount of vigor in that situation. I mean, Jalen Brunson, look at the replay. Jalen Brunson was completely sold out to getting off the ground as high as he possibly can and flying at the shooter. And I'm not like criticizing him for that. It just kind of stood out to me like, man, like he really went full bore to contest the shot, and you run a risk when you do that. Yeah. Now that was seeing it full speed first time. When I saw the replay of it, I mean, I completely agree. It's a bad call. I felt like, first of all, he did the right thing in going on the opposite side body of the shooting hand.
Right.
So that's really important. If you are going to go and contest that and get off the ground, and by the way, just for the record, I hate when guys in that situation come out and they do the whole thing, feet firmly planted on the ground, and they just kind of put their hands up like this because they're so terrified. You're not impeding a great shooter like in that situation at all. So I do believe in kind of getting a hand up and maybe even getting off the ground a little bit, but fully extending your arm. But Brunson's momentum was so full bore at the shooter, you open up this can of worms that an official could interpret any sort of contact as being a foul because of how hard you're going defensively. He did the right thing. He went out on the opposite side of the release point, which is what you got to do, fly by the non-shooting arm. And I thought the arm of the shooter sort of came out a little bit, the elbow that kind of made contact with Brunson's stomach and side. That probably wouldn't have happened if he didn't do that. So for me, and now that I had the luxury of watching the replay several times, that should not have been called, and Eddie Malloy pretty much admitted it, and it is an absolutely brutal way to lose a game. But it might make Jalen Brunson gun-shy ever about doing that again, like to that extent. to
This is
contest it
what I
that
hate.
hard. Yeah.
All these
Because
rules,
he
man,
went
make guys
after it, man,
afraid to
and it's,
contest.
you run a risk because most guys err on the other side. They're overly cautious defensively in that situation, and you give a guy a decent look in a comfort zone. Well, Brunson wanted to take away the comfort zone, and he did that. And as a result, and you could even see, by the way, when the official blew the whistle, there was zero commitment to his call. The look on his face immediately was like, "Oh yeah, I guess this is kind of a big call." And then he's talking to Brunson and Thibodeau, and it was just kind of like you could see like there was zero validation internally that was the right thing to do. And then like Eddie Malloy pretty much said it after the game.
Yeah. We got a super chat here from Jay Money. We'll bring it on. It says, thoughts on Klay's comments on accepting his lesser role and saying he modeled his game after Ray Allen to be effective into his late 30s. Love it for him. I did not see these comments, so I can't speak on them. Did you see these by chance, Legs?
No, I didn't see those comments actually.
So but we can infer what was said based on this comment. So having not seen it though, what do you think about him just saying that he's ready to accept that role?
Yeah, look, I think, man, you can't even begin to overstate how difficult coming to terms with that is for a player on that level that has accomplished that much. That still feels like, because he can do it on given nights, like it still feels like he's the same guy. Now, his confidence right now is completely rattled. There's no doubt about that. But again, last night, 11 for what it shoots efficiently, 26 points. A lot of that looked like Klay Thompson, the normal Klay Thompson. So he knows it's there. And so that makes it even harder. It's not like it's obvious, man. He's 38 years old and he's just not close to the same guy, and you completely create a different role for him. That's not who Klay Thompson is right now. So I give him a lot of credit, man. And how hard it must have been, his pride, to be able to come to terms with it. It is difficult for an athlete to accept it, but it starts with verbally being able to say it, because that's hard for guys to even say.
Yeah.
For him to be able to say it shows the work he is doing internally and mentally to come to terms with it. And how can I help this team? That's really all that's going to matter. How can I best serve helping this team? And on a given night, it's going to be different. And for him to admit that, man, I'm just telling you, that is a very difficult thing to come to mentally, particularly when your running mate still looks as good as he does. That's hard. And so give Klay Thompson all the credit in the world, man. And I just hope that he finds some kind of better rhythm at some point this year, and he's able to do that for the Warriors if they do make the playoffs.
Would be a good story for him to find a new role different from what he was, but then excel in that role. There's something, sweet about that. 76ers last night behind Buddy Hield, 24 points, 8 assists, 5 of 8 from 3, get an upset win in Cleveland over the Clippers. The 76ers had been reeling. The Clippers had been streaking, and the script reversed last night. What do you make of that box score and that outcome?
Love Buddy Hield, Kelly Oubre Jr. helping Tyrese Maxey out, because we love Maxey, but we know that Maxey's not a guy right now. He's not a guy that's going to be able to go and just control a dominated game, right? He's not. This isn't Luka. This isn't LeBron. This isn't a guy like that, right? He's really good scorer, getting better at facilitating. But he's a smaller type guard. He's not going to be able to go and dominate. He's going to need help every night. And look, for the Sixers to put up 123 against that team, and I didn't see that game at all, so I'm not sure how it played out. I'm just looking at the numbers. I mean, you get 24 out of Hield, 24 out of Oubre, Maxey with 22. So your starters and then 23 combined between Martin and Reed. So your starters played really well against an elite defensive team. That's a big win for Philly.
The Pacers fall to the Hornets. The Hornets had 6 players in double figures. Very impressive. The starting 5 plus Grant Williams off the bench, Seth Curry off the bench as well. They picked up that win. And Miles Bridges, 20 points, 10 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 steals. He continues to put up some pretty amazing box scores. Meanwhile, Halliburton played 34 minutes. I believe that's the most since he's returned from his injury, but they drop another one. What's going on with the Pacers here?
Yeah, that's a bad loss, man, because you're not talking about a team in the Hornets that's, obviously they've got 12 wins. They're not trying to get up into you at this point in the year. Like they're trying to figure out who they are. Now they've made some changes. They've gotten rid of some key pieces that were there. They're trying to figure out, like, what are we? What's the landscape for us going forward? You get the Pacers coming in, one of the more high-octane offenses in the league, and they get held to 102 points. They only took 33s in this game, which for them is a low number. They had 2 offensive rebounds, so you're not giving yourself any margin of error to make up for it. Bad possession. You get no second shots basically the entire game. It's a bad loss. There's no other way to put it. You had decent nights out of Siakam. Nesmith had a good line. Miles Turner had a good line. Halliburton, 5 for 15, 12 assists, 13 points. So substandard for him, but still, the way the rest of their starters played should have been enough. They got basically nothing out of their bench. It's just a bad loss for Indiana. You're Indiana. You get teams that are below you in the standings. You're going to have to win those games if you want to really kind of stay in the mix there in that middle pack of the Eastern Conference, because you're going to have to play all those top teams. So take care of the bottom feeders when you get a chance. All you have to do is run against teams like that usually, and you're going to be able to wear them out, and then that didn't happen.
We got a couple more games I want to speed through here. The Mavs pick up another one, albeit a come-from-behind win against the Washington Wizards. Daniel Gafford, one of the quickest homecomings ever. It was in Dallas, but playing against his former team in his second game with the Mavericks. And what do you know, Legs? 16 points, 17 rebounds, 7 offensive rebounds, 2 games in a row where he's been a monster on the glass for them.
Yeah, and I just again, I loved it from the second it was announced. I thought this was a major addition. And he's exactly what they need. A bigger, more athletic, and just hard-working big man that Luka's going to fall in love with immediately. And they knew, Jason Kidd said, this guy crushed us on the glass repeatedly. We played against him. We knew he'd give us that element, and he had 7 offensive rebounds against his old team. Huge night.
Somebody in the comments of the last show said, I'm never telling Luka he's doing a great job. So I'm going to go ahead and say it. Luka's doing a great job, Legs. 26 points, 11 rebounds, 15 assists. He's pretty good. Let's go. We have 2 more quick ones I want to run through. The Pelicans beat the Grizzlies 96-87. What is this, 1988? Legs, what are we, 1994 NBA? 2 teams under 100 points. Didn't catch this game either, but kind of surprised to see the Pelicans in this grinded out game.
The 96-87, you didn't tell us what happened in the second half.
What's
because
that?
that's usually that's like a halftime score.
Yeah, that is halftime. Yep.
Potentially in the league, so you left something out there. That's weird. That's a weird stat line. Neither team obviously played very well offensively in the game. But look, sometimes as a coach, I just know that like the way they think. Sometimes you win a game like this, as ugly as it may have been.
Yeah,
you're kind of like, wow, that's kind of cool. We could win a game like that when we didn't look anywhere close to what we looked when we played well offensively, and we were still able to get the win. So that's about all you take out of that, and then you burn the film and you move on.
And then the last game, of course, the Spurs beating the Raptors. The really story here is just Victor Wembanyama. We haven't talked about him in 4 shows. 27 points, 14 rebounds, 5 assists, 10 block shots. He did have 7 turnovers and was 10 of 14 from the field. That stat line is absolutely insane.
Yeah, and it's, he had a long stretch of 20-point games and some 30-point games to finish up January. And then he was like cooled off a little bit offensively at the beginning of the month. The first 4 games of this month, he didn't break 20 points. And now he's going back to back again. His rebounding numbers, though, consistently have been great. And look, one of the things that fascinated us about him when we first started getting wind of him and then watching more film on him and all that leading up to the draft was this notion that you could have someone this skilled with this kind of size offensively with a handle and a 3-point shot and ridiculous length in transition that can also be a massive disruptor on the other end of the floor with his length and the way he protects the rim. And then, you get a game like that and you see what the upside is. And like when they asked Pop after one of these games, like, who else can do something like this? He says, nobody, only him. Right. And he might be right now with that kind of stat line.
All right. I'm ready I know it's early, Legs, but I'm making a bold prediction that I feel unreasonably confident about. Victor Wembanyama, when it's all said and done, will set an NBA record for most quadruple doubles. The current record is 1, so he only needs 2. He already got within 5 assists of this in his rookie season. I mean, it's not crazy. Like the 20 or the 10 and 10 points, 10 rebounds. That's going to happen every game. Now you're just talking about how many games is he going to get 10 blocks? How many games is he going to get 10 assists? I think it happens at least twice in his career, especially in today's NBA where, we're scoring 130 a night. I think he's going to get at least 2 quadruple doubles in his career.
Well, okay, yeah, okay. If you put it that way, I don't know how many you think he's going to end up with. But yeah, he only has to have more than one. So yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. By the way, we don't know this because I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, they didn't keep block shots like back in the day. Yeah. Russell, those guys, right? So I wonder if, since they started tracking it, has anybody had a 30-20-10 game with blocks?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. Probably not, because the list of 30-20-10 games is really low anyway.
Because I wonder if Olajuwon ever did that. But if not, that's my prediction. He'll have the first 30-20 game, 30-20-10 or 40-20-10. He could have potentially.
I could look this up in just a second here. I'm trying to get it to 10 blocks here. Let me see. Because you can filter this on StatHead. So I'm trying to get points. You're saying 30 points. Rebounds, you're saying 20 rebounds.
20 boards, 10 blocks.
10 blocks. All right. In NBA history, playoffs or otherwise, and let's take a look here and see if it's ever happened. Twice, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Hakeem Olajuwon. So Kareem did this in November of 1975 against the Hawks. He finished with 39 points, 23 rebounds, 5 assists, 10 block shots. And then Hakeem did this in 1989 against the Orlando Magic, 32 points, 25 rebounds, 10 blocks.
So there's the challenge, because Kareem got the 39. There it is, 40-20-10. Yeah. That's the game I'm looking for out of Victor Wembanyama, and he will get there.
I love how high we're setting the bar for him. Set a record in quadruple doubles, maybe 5x5s, and then a 40-20-10. Legs, a great show, man. We're off to a hot start this week. The show keeps growing, and we appreciate that from everybody, especially on YouTube. It's growing. If you haven't subscribed already, do so. Hit that like button for us. Leave a comment. Let us know that you're enjoying the show. But perhaps the best thing you can do is share the show with people you know. Say, hey, this is a show, whether it's on Reddit or Twitter or people you know in real life. Just let them know, hey, Tim Legler, Adam Matas, they're sharing insight on every game, passionate, following it. And then leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Those also help people to discover our show. Legs, anything before we get out of here?
No, just remember, when you show up in this chat room, just have a little bit of reality about your own team. That's all I ask for, because here we are unbiased, but we're unafraid, brother. So put your big boy pants on. But we love engaging with everybody in this chat, man, and we love carving it up with you.
We love the passion, man. A lot of passionate fans in the chat here. Thanks, everybody. We're off tomorrow, but we are back on Thursday. We'll see you then.
Silly like the mayor.